Previously on the Inspired Challenge podcast.
You had mentioned something about being able to walk away when a boundary is not respected. Mm-hmm. I think that's something that we hear that, we think it, we say it to ourselves, but when it comes to being in that relationship for X amount of time, there's always that feeling of comfortability that sort of sets in. Mm-hmm. And so what do you do when you're 6 months in, a year in, 5 years in, and now the boundary has been respected for that time, but now there's a desire for something different or a change to occur or for, stepping outside of the norm? What do you guys think is the answer in that situation?
What's up, you guys? This is Raw Footage Devahntau, and real quick, before we get back into the video, trying out something new, added the previously on, just to kind of remind about what happened, so that way there would be some context, and it's not just jumping back into Kevin talking and giving his take. So I added that for that purpose. Hope it is more useful than it is annoying. And then also, I just want to say this has been so cool to see all the different people that have gotten excited about this interview. So I'm super happy about it. And and it makes so much sense because the value that Jake and Kevin give us is just awesome. I love the takes that they provided, and just the food for thoughts. And even some of the practical advice that was given in these discussions. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say. This episode right here talks about a lot of very super practical things to implement. Red light, yellow light, green light will come up. And also just, let me not give it away. I always have a tendency to want to do that. But enjoy the video, and I'll see you guys at the end of it. Bye. And now,
yeah, I think there's a lot of really good questions, Jacob. Man, you got some good stuff in there.
Yeah,
so
man, I've been surprised at your answers, man.
Well, I'm not surprised. He's a pretty smart kid, and I think, Devahntau, what you're asking is so important. I think, man, you covered a lot. I think the difference I think boundaries are super important, and I think the problem is most of us don't know what our boundaries are. So you got a couple of things. You got to start with the destination in mind. So if you called me and said, "Hey, let's go meet for lunch," you're like, "Great, I'll see you there at noon." And then I was like, "Where are we meeting?" And then you did. Where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do? So, I mean, I think...
Where are we meeting? When are we meeting?
Yeah, what kind of food do you have, or
is it going to be cold?
Right. Do all kinds... What do I need to dress like? All those kind of questions that make that a great experience. And so I think a lot of people start dating because they're thinking about what's instantaneous and what's immediate. Mm-hmm. And I think if you sit there and go long-term, what do you want? What do you want long-term? What kind of man do you want to settle with? What kind of woman do you want to spend the rest of your life with? And writing some of those things out. And I think most of the same, some of it, you got to be attracted to your spouse. Physicality is an important aspect of both marriage and dating for sure. But I think you also have to look at the character things, and you have to be disciplined, because discipline really is giving up what you want now for what you want next. Mm-hmm. And so when you start going in that and saying hey, man, we've all woke up, I don't want to go to the gym. I don't want to go read. I don't want to go do this, and you give that up, you're not going to be disciplined. But making those small, consistent choices. Now, I think if you start creating what your boundaries are, it's like this. I do this with students. I've done this for a while. I always think of stoplight, right? Red, yellow, red, yellow, and green. And you stop and you say, okay, what are some of your red light things? That's a full stop. There's certain things that maybe you have, and you've got to give some grace and compassion that there's some things that are different for different people. Mm-hmm. But then as somebody, hey, this is the kind of lady that I want to raise my kids. This is the kind of, and I didn't have all that stuff down. I'd be by need. It's not a recipe. We're not baking a cake or making tacos. But you do have to sit there and have some hey, what are some of the things that you want to have, in that? And for me, it was man, I wanted someone who I wanted someone who believed in Jesus and that Christ was a daily component of she didn't have to be perfect, you know, but I also want somebody who felt like I felt called to ministry, who's into that.
Quick question.
Yeah,
Do you
man.
think a lot of people right now are getting into relationships just as time fillers instead of as
1000%.
with a mission in mind?
Boredom, man. Like, we're so overstimulated. We're in such a situation where, especially this generation 20 and under, like they've been stimulated the whole time. Like, grew up on screens. There's something always going. And here's the thing, Jacob and I were just talking about this because we're talking about loneliness, right? Like, and here's one of the things. I don't know if you'd probably remember. I know you remember me saying, but when we quote it, is like, if you don't know how to be alone, all you're ever going to know is feeling lonely. So listen,
that's
man,
so real.
Go to a movie by yourself sometime. Go for a walk by yourself. Go grab tacos. I'm thinking about tacos. I haven't eaten for that. But like,
A lot of mention of tacos here.
if you can't spend time like alone, all you're going to do is feel lonely. And so there's a value. Hold on, let me just finish this real quick, because I know I got for it, but that red light, green, and your green light is like, these are the things they have to have. Like, man, I've got to do that. Here's the problem. Most of us either date or friendships are just as it, man. Like the whole thing is, I saw this meme the other day and it had like Jesus, the 12 disciples. And there's like, so many people miss that, like the fact that Jesus had 12 close friends at the age of 30. Here's the problem, man. A lot of people my age, they don't have one or two people they feel like are their good, solid friends. And I got 10 of them, man. My table's wide. Like, I've got people into it, but it's also small, because if you weren't there in the trauma, I'm not gonna welcome you in. I'm not gonna push you away, but I'm just saying, like, I've got 5 or 6. Like, I think about this often, man. When I die, there's pallbearers, right? There's 6 people. I got my 6. I got my 6 boys that I know that are going to be there no matter what happened. No matter what, I lose my job, what I did dumb, what I would do, and all that stuff. So I value that, and I wanted to value that because I'll tell you what, one for my wife, Megan, one of the things is I wanted to see her that valued friends and what they needed more than what she wanted in that moment. I remember a bunch of us hanging out one time. We were at a coffee shop going to see a concert that I knew she for months, and we had just started dating maybe like a month or so. And her roommate called her, and she just came the rest of it. She put her ticket on the table and said, "Hey, listen, I got to go meet with my roommate. She's going through some stuff. If you guys can sell it, great, or give it away." And I knew that meant a lot to her. And I just sat there and I was like, that's the kind of, because she was fighting for her friend and her friendship and her value. And I knew this at the beginning of marriage. Like, one of the things for me was, man, God's called me to be my wife's best friend, but not her only friend. So I got finances and money and time and stuff set aside so that she does this. Because here's the problem. This is when it comes controlling, is when you haven't had communication, right? When you haven't talked about anything except for the things you like or maybe the things that upset you, and that's it. I think the other problem is when you don't have consistency. So, like, you meet a girl at the club and then she still wants to go to the club. You changed. She did. You know what I'm saying? Like, I love fishing and hunting and stuff. And there's
accurate.
There's certain
so
things,
accurate.
but people don't like consistency. Like, in a stage now, like, I've got people, some of my people that I love dearly, way different end of the spectrum where it comes on values and marriage and views of dating and all of that. But I stand strong, and we still can have great conversations because they know I'm going to be consistent. And those are the same people, when they're in a bad situation, can call me, and say, man, and you know what? I'm not like, oh, I told you so. I'm like, man, that stinks. I hate that you're going through that. But being consistent. So when you're sitting there and you're like, man, this is a value of mine, but then you don't back it up. It ain't a value of yours. It's an opinion. And it's an opinion, or it's an idea. And if an idea, an idea without a plan is just a wish, and all you're doing and all that stuff. Oof. The last thing in it is compassion, man. That's when it looks like I got boundaries with my kids, and I sat down with them, and when they violated those boundaries and when he didn't make grades, I didn't yell at him. But get what? I'll just use, because he brought up, hey, we're going to talk about this and where he was. And I laid out, he knew that like anything other than this grade that I knew he was capable for. When he took AP stats, I wouldn't expect him to get an A. I'm just saying, let's be real. Like, you know, he's smart. He's just a smart kid. It is a hard class.
You took AP stats? That's
yeah, he
crazy.
Did. Yeah. He did drop out. But at least I'm going to share that with the rest of the people. But when he took that, I knew it. And he didn't do it for internet time. He didn't drop out just for internet time. But it was hard. But what I'm saying is we communicated. But when I sat with him on the front end and said, this is what I see in you, this is what I know you can do, and you're smart, and you could play video games or surf the web or spend time on social media all day. And how I know that? Because I could do that without. But when he violated that and it didn't work out, I wasn't, oh yeah, see, told you. It was compassion. Say, son, there's good communication on the other. There's consistency that breeds respect. And then finally there was compassion on how we do that. And so if you add those discipline and all of that stuff and you're walking in there and being like, let's be consistent. Let's be compassionate. And I'm at another C in there, is like, let's be clear. Because that's the problem too, is people say, I don't want you to go to the club. What you're really saying is, I don't trust you. And here's the whole thing, is you might not. And what you're saying is they probably don't trust you either. And that's, if you don't trust yourself and you've got all these rules and no boundaries and you're making up it's going online. Because here's the whole thing. What I love about that traffic light thing, red, yellow, or green, is even Jacob just a while back, I remember him starting to like drive. We had to make decisions like, Ben, you don't want to decide, like yellow lights are tough because like I'm different. I see yellow, that means slow down. My wife means is hurry up, you know? And it is, and it's different. It's those different kind of like things in there, but you don't want to be in the intersection, decide, is this a red or a yellow or that? Like we're in Florida, man, hurricanes happen sometimes, the electric goes out and you're like, you see that without any of those lights, what happens? People get frustrated, they get irritable, they'll slamming each other. It's chaos. Everywhere. And that's it, because nobody knows what to do. And us that live here are like, hey, when the light, you stop and you wait for the next one. But then you got somebody from that are like, oh, I'm just going to take advantage. I'm going to go or not stop. And then you get in accidents, you get all this stuff. And that's what happens. So setting those boundaries ahead, I think with compassion, with consistency, with clarity, and with love, really is a different way to feel like that. And to be just share that, man. I feel like instead of being like, I don't want you to go there, it's like, hey, I'm struggling. That's an insecurity for me, because I know this. If it's a problem for my wife, it's now a problem for me. As silly as it may be, if it's that's for both of us, because there's things that she would be like, it's not even a problem for me, but it's a problem for me because I love her. That's a problem. And because Jacob, there's certain things he's communicated to me. Hey, Dad, when you say this, that's how I feel. Guess what? I'm not going to say it. Even I don't have to agree with it, but I agree that I love him, and I agree that I want what's best for him. And the same thing when he's come to me, and we talk about this. We just had this week talking about family. Like, there's some people that their level for sarcasm in my family is a lot higher than for others, and all of that. And so those are complicated conversations. They're not easy, but they start setting boundaries for each other, so that when we have those, we're clear and compassionate and consistent for each other.
Yeah, that's great. That was great.
Wow. Mic drop.
It's good questions, man.
You had mentioned the part involving the club where if a person, it may be a insecurity for one person, maybe you don't trust her, and maybe you think that she doesn't trust you. So, and this is something that I've seen people say, and I'm curious about your take on it. Some would say, oh, I'm not insecure about it. It's like having, you guys may have heard this, it's like having a Ferrari and you take it to a low-income neighborhood and you leave the doors unlocked and you leave it there for a week and a half. And then you expect it to come back and for that Ferrari to be in beautiful condition. Nobody's gotten inside of it. Nobody's done anything. Nobody's tried to hotwire it. Nobody's slashed the tires. Nobody's tried to sell it off and then it hasn't gotten towed away, nothing. And they would say, why would you allow something that you value and care about and that you hold dearly, that you had to work extremely hard for, why would you allow that and be okay with that being in a dangerous scenario? And in the sense of dating, why would you allow your partner to go to a club when a club is meant for dating? It's meant for hookups. It's meant for debauchery. It's meant for intoxication and de-sobering of the mind. In what scenario would that be okay? Now, is there a scenario where, of course, it could work out, things could be okay, there could be safety protocols put in place, of course, but things are always good until they go bad, and why even increase the chances of that risky outcome instead of just cutting it off at the bud and having that hard line?
I can own a Ferrari, but I don't own my wife. And so at the end of the day, the difference in that is I can want certain things, but I mean, it's her, she's behind the wheel in that. Like where I put my Ferrari, I mean, I would never intentionally, I can't put it up. I'm in ministry, man. The only Ferrari I get is a Matchbox. I got Hulu Plus this year. Like that's, you know, so that's it. But I mean, like, yeah, but at the end of the day, I can just share with my wife my concerns. I can share with that person, but they're behind the driver's seat. You know, at the end of the day, there's a lot of decisions. I am ultimately responsible for my wife, to my kids, to my Creator about the decisions that I make. And I think that's the issue too, is we start saying that like that's my boyfriend, and that's, I mean, here's one thing I've noticed. It's always been there a little bit, but there's so much more controlling in relationships now. Now there's so much more opportunities, and there's more things you got to control, right? Because when I was in high school, there wasn't cell phones or emails or whatever. So like now it's like you got digital footprints that you can watch people and control all that stuff and where they're at. And why don't you see my wife? She can look on everything on my phone. My wife has all my passwords. She can look at all that stuff. I can look at her. Great. I don't care. In all of this, I'm not gonna give it to everybody, but to her, you know, like, so I'm in that aspect of like, you're right. You know, like I wouldn't want something that I value to be in an invaluable place, but I can't control that. You know, like if my wife's the Ferrari and she's driving that and she leaves it in a neighborhood where it's more likely to get vandalized and stolen, that's her responsibility. She's driving it, and I can just love her because I can't control her. I can't control myself half the time. I can't say no to nachos sometimes, you know, like much less feel like I can have that responsibility. Now I can be influential. I can't control my kids. The moments that I try to, now they may feel like it's control, and even sometimes even use that against me. And I got to be strong enough to know that like, I'm not control. I'm actually setting boundaries, and I was compassionate and kind and consistent. Are there moments I've tried to control? For sure. And those aren't my finest, but I will tell you that like, across the board, I think Jacob could say this, is the vast majority of the time that Megan and I parent and that we offer in the house, it's more influential than it is controlling. And so as we go into that, like, I like your analogy, but I ain't driving that car, so I can't say where it's parked. Jacob, you got anything?
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, kind of what he said. Like at the end of the day, all you really can do is like love people and help guide them. Like you really can't force people's hands. You kind of just show them the way, or at least the way that you think will be more beneficial to them. And that's the thing, that's where it can kind of get difficult, is I know I'm not always right, but a lot of the times I can think I am. And so when I give pieces of advice, it's a lot of times, if it doesn't particularly relate to me in the fact of if my friend asked me for relationship advice, I don't know exactly like what to do in the situations, and I've never been through it, but I can still grasp the concept, and I still understand what's going on and how to deal with those things. But at the end of the day, all you can really do is like help people through situations, and you can't be there for everybody too. So you're really only able to give like small nuggets of information to help people, and you can't, like you said, you can't force people's hand. Even the people you love the most. Like at the end of the day, there's nothing stopping people from doing, I mean, really anything. It's like, yeah, you set boundaries, but at the end of the day, like those things can be easily broken. Like someone, like you see it all the time especially recently, of just like people snapping and they immediately break every boundary. They don't care anymore. They're just like, I'm just going to do what I want.
Verbal abuse, physical, everything is.
And they're just like, I'm done. Like you see it a lot of times too with being an alcoholic and stuff like that, where people they're very compassionate, but once they get around that stuff, it's like all that goes thrown out the back door or window, whatever the saying is. It gets thrown out, and they're like, they become very controlling, very demanding, or they don't care what anybody says at all. They just do kind of what they want. I think that's probably a pretty harmful saying too, is just do whatever you want or do what makes you happy. Because it definitely can get you into some trouble.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's especially when you don't know what you're doing. The first time for everything, you don't really know what you're doing the first time. Like you're gonna suck at everything you do the first time.
This was my second time setting up all this audio equipment, and it was awful.
Oh yeah, you did great though. But yeah, it's like you're gonna suck the first time at everything, and so might as well kind of like let other people help you or guide you through that stuff. You don't want to be stuck somewhere on your own. Because I think I was telling my brother this a few weeks ago. It's like all anybody ever wants on the planet is love. Everybody wants to be loved. Nobody wants to be hated at all. Everybody wants to be loved and cared for. And that's sometimes all like the best we can do for people is to just show love no matter what.
Absolutely. Yeah. When I think about that question, because it's something that I've looked at, and I'm not going to lie, sometimes I look at it and I go, man, that analogy actually makes a lot of sense. Like, yeah, this is like your most prized thing that, like, obviously we don't look at people how we look at cars, but the idea of if you value something, you care about it, of course you want to protect it. Of course you want to keep it well. You want to maintain it well, make sure it's taken care of so that it's in the tip-top condition. If you hear something going wrong in the engine of it, you're not just going to sit there and just let it fester for a while. You're going to, hey, my mechanic, my car's doing this. This is my Ferrari. Get my Ferrari good. And like, that's the spirit that we would ideally have with a partner. We would see, oh, maybe their spirit is lower than normal. Let me tend to that spirit. Hey, what's going on? I notice you seem a little down. You've been seeming different. And, so in those same ways, I can see it. And so when I look at it, the only thing that I can possibly come up with is maybe you don't get a Ferrari then. Maybe you get an awesome Toyota Camry. Like maybe something that doesn't seem to have all of the bells and whistles, all 100% of what you want, but that is a reliable car. You like the body of the car. You know that it's way less likely to be vandalized because there's a lot of Toyota Camrys there. This may be coming off as an awful analogy.
I get what you're saying. I think the other part too is to use that analogy, you usually don't find a Ferrari in a really bad neighborhood. So if you're trying to find a girl that you found at the club and listen, the club, going to a club necessarily ain't a bad thing because it's not just the club. It's the surrounding of, like, I know people that don't drink and don't party and they just go and they want to dance. Great. And they're around other good people. They got a group of friends that are around them and all this stuff. But I think for me, the aspect of dating is it really matters, like, where you're going to find those people. I mean, it can be both positive and negative. I mean, part of my job, even at the church, is protection of all this stuff, because occasionally we've got people that, on one hand, man, have made some bad decisions. They want to get their life right, and they want to come and they want to find a good Christian guy or girl. Great. But go get your life right first. And the other hand, we got predators that come there because they feel like some of these people are more vulnerable and easily to manipulate and all stuff. And so they come in there. And so we've got to set those gates too, of just like, man, time is just a value of that. And I think, man, just in that analogy, to me, like, is it, if if she's a Ferrari, are you a Lambo? Like, and how are you doing that? Or really, what is the Ferrari in that conversation too? Because if you think she's a Ferrari and she's going to a bad place, but she thinks you're a Pinto and you may get back-ended and blow up, like you're gonna have a problem, you know. But to me, I sit there and just to go back to my other thing, to me, the Ferrari is the relationship, is not. And sometimes my wife's driving, sometimes I'm driving, sometimes we're on autopilot. And sometimes we're not paying attention to where we're going. And sometimes we're, you know, backseat driving, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And so to me, it goes back to like, if the relationship's the most important thing, there's going to be times where I'm submissive. There's going to be times where I lead. There's going to be a lot of times where I'm communicating, a lot of times where I'm compassionate and kind, a lot of times where I'm asking for forgiveness, and I've got to step back and reassess where I'm at. And so I think in that, man, Ferrari may not just be the person. You know, it may be the relationship. If this relationship is this valuable, what are we going to do? And having this, what's our red light stuff? What's our yellow light stuff? What's our green light stuff of like that we're not going to allow in our house? And people don't have those conversations because they're nervous, or they lie about them too, right? Like that happens all the time.
Definitely.
It's like, I know many of people that are like, hey, but the truth is when you go into dating and thinking that long-term thing, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that has to do with sexuality and all this stuff, but also finances, man, how people view money and all this stuff. Two most common problems are like financial and sexual, those kind of things, some kind of sexual promiscuity or adultery or cheating or lack thereof, you know, a detachment from that, or I don't find that person attractive or whatever. Or the aspect of how we spend money. Somebody's an overspender, somebody's an underspender, somebody's too controlling. There's not this sense of kindness and this sense of like, you know, I know in our house, even though I may on a W-2 form make more money, it's our money. And I don't look at every single thing my wife spends and all of that kind of stuff, because there's just trust and there's kindness. And if I did, there's probably some things like, girl, how many pairs of shoes you need, you know, right? Like, and all of that kind of stuff. But that stuff to her, that's kind of like, to me, that's a green light, because I know and I trust where she's from and all this stuff. And although she may go spend shoes on this or something like that, she's also very conservative in this area and that. And there's just a system of trust and respect that comes over time. So it's good.
Yeah, it in the biblical world, we believe in this idea, and some of you guys may get lost, but stick with me here. But we believe in this idea that good root, good fruit. Bad root, bad fruit. You can kind of judge a person and know them based off of what the basis of, one, maybe their past looks like, and two, what they've done with that past and how do they talk about that past? Do they look at it as opportunity for growth, or do they see themselves as the victim all the time? Do they see themselves as constrained constantly, and now you can kind of sort of like start to see a rebellious spirit maybe quelling in there, just waiting to break out? And so these are all things that I think that sometimes people can get these small indicators. They can get these small little pieces and be like, that's nothing. That was just a moment, or you know, that person is just so attractive. Like, I'm sure it's nothing, and they can make all these reasons as to why that thing doesn't matter, versus looking at that and saying, that's probably something that I should look at and that I should either investigate or pay attention to see how does that play out before I emotionally invest more in that, before I allow my identity to get more wrapped up into this whole thing as a relationship. Like, when I think about the example of the Ferrari, I would never even get into the stage where it is a Ferrari without first knowing the make of it. Where was it made? Did anybody handle it beforehand? If so, what was the treatment of it? Was there a lot of, was it like filling it up all the time, getting it served, or is there a lot of like burning it out, like the tread on it is real bad? And just, you know, when I look at it, I'm like, okay, what's this person? And these were some of my qualifiers that I looked at with my girlfriend. So Honey, thank you. I asked my girlfriend, how's your relationship with your dad?
Yeah.
How many friends did you have growing up? What was your relationship like with your siblings? Would you say that you guys were close or just kind of Okay. Have you ever like had to take care of like a bunch of kids? Like, how was that for you? Mm-hmm. And none of this was just passive, just random conversation. Sure. I wanted to see, do you have a father figure? Do you respect males? And do you respect authority? I wanted to see, do you have parents that model a good relationship? Do you see conflict and see how to resolve it? Do you have friends that you care about? If so, what have those been like? Have you been around kids? Do you enjoy being around kids? Do you look forward to being with them? Do you look forward to raising one at some point?
I hope you didn't do all this on the first date, because that would be creepy. Here's my Devahntau interview. Here's a 47-page questionnaire about... No, I think that's smart, man. I think what you're doing is, throughout time, that's why getting to know each other, emotionally. I think it's one of the ways where one of the reasons God tells us to say, hey, to abstain physically until you get all that other stuff, until the commitment's there, until you know each other mentally and emotionally, because all of this stuff matters. I would say, I think one of the most valuable things is looking at their group of close friends. Like who the
100%.
The company
Wow.
that you keep, because the truth is the people around you, you're an influence of the five most influential people.
I used
around
to
you.
think that was just like a saying, but like, holy smokes, it's the most true thing possible.
Well, and there should be diversity. I mean, think about I think about if I asked Jacob who the five outside of our family were. They're very distinct and diverse. Mm-hmm. People and all of that stuff. But there's a commonality of a lot of them: loyalty, Christ-likeness, a commitment to family, all of that stuff. Because the truth is, you're some of the 5 or 6 people around you. If you're that 6th person, you're going to be influenced. If you're around 5 arrogant people, you're going to be the 6th. And all that. And I remember somebody used this analogy a long time ago about like that your friends are either a mirror of who you are or a map of where you're going. And I love that because you look around who your people are and who they are and some of your friends and all that stuff. And listen, they're super, you should have some diversity because there's people in me that are some of my friends are a little bit more academic. I got a friend who's writing his 3rd book right now. Just read that for him.
Oh, dog.
I've got, because that's a side of me. I've got one of my really close friends who happens to be my pastor, Dustin. He's a good friend who loves.
Shout out to Pastor Dustin.
Yeah, great guy. He was Jacob's middle school pastor back in the day in Atlanta. Yeah, we were in Atlanta. And just knowing him and like the pastoral side and what that looks like, and there's different things like that. And then and I think of my buddy Zach, who entrepreneurial and like building and how do we create things and how do we deep thinker, philosophical, sociology, anthropology, all of that kind of stuff. I need those because those are different persons of my personality that my wife does. And I think of her friends the same way of like those 4 quarters of people around her. Because, most people would rather have 100 pennies than 4 quarters when it came to people. And Megan's taught that to me a lot. Like, I was like, I'll have 1 quarter, a couple dimes, 2 nickels and, stuff. But your friends are really valuable. And I think that's what matters, even our conversations with who we are talking about, even with our kids and like, those people that are around you, just because you can have fun with them, man, that does mean you're influencing them. But great. But I've got friends that like I have fun with, but I got to keep them at a distance. I'm not going to share with them everything because I may be a bad influence on them, to be honest with you. There's some people that like, especially people you grow up with, years later and like you took different paths and you go in and you're like, man, when you're apart, you're great. But when you're together, it's like, man, it's only a matter of time before like, the problems can arise.
That was what I was going to ask you. So like you mentioned having this circle of friends and do you guys think that it's possible to have a circle of friends and like you mentioned with the diversity, have that diversity and like you had mentioned that all of the friends are believers. Now, do you think that it's smart to have a basis of that, like all of them be believers and then, or what if there are friends that some are believers, some are non-believers, and basically knowing when to listen to certain friends and when to kind of put them on mute in your mind? Are there friends that you have in mind that you do that with? And if so, can those be the closest? Or would you say to always make those people the dimes, the nickels?
So I am reminded how antsy some of those questions were in there. And I think the navigation that was done on them was really and truly masterful. These questions that I pose, some of them are very awkward or uncomfortable, but this is how the culture of today is speaking. And so it's important to acknowledge it and to respond to what are some prevalent ideas and beliefs that are going on. So even as strange as some of these are, it's conversations that have to be had, because if people just refuse to have them and there's just a subculture of slowly developing and growing people that are thinking these things and people aren't prepared for it, then you're going to be caught off guard when somebody comes up and they make a really good Ferrari analogy and you just don't have a response to it. So I hope that everything across the entire, 34 minutes, maybe a little bit longer after post editing, I hope that all of it has been able to be valuable and that you were able to enjoy this episode just as much as part 1. And definitely stay tuned, because part 3 will be dropping on Friday. You're not going to want to miss the conclusion to this interview series finale. Until next time, you guys have a great one, and I'll see you. Bye.